And now that the recording's going, again, I'll just introduce myself. I'm Kelly Choi, the Grants Manager for ArtsFairfax. Welcome. Thank you all for joining us today. This is our info session for our General Operating Support Grant for FY25. A couple of housekeeping notes as we get started. I'm going to ask that you stay on mute during our conversation today. I do have several pauses built in to the presentation where I will ask for questions. At that time, of course, you're welcome to unmute yourself. I also know that this is a long explanation and many of you are volunteers or have other commitments through work today. So if you need to come and go during our meeting, that's perfectly okay. The recording for today's conversation will be available sometime next week on our website. All right, so as we get started, here is a brief look at the agenda for today's meeting. First and foremost, the applications are open. They are up on our submittable site and everything is ready to go. We are going to take our time today to review the grant guidelines, give you an overview of the whole process, really look at all the documents and resources that we have on our website. And then we will walk through the application itself within submittable. And again, you'll have time to ask questions as we're going along. You can also put your questions into the chat as you like. And when we get to those breakpoints, I'll come back to them and see if we can address them. The one thing I will suggest, if you have a question that is very specific to your organization or a scenario that you are coming up against, we may talk about that individually offline after this conversation. All right, moving forward. So I'm going to start at a very high level and introduce you to the whole ArtsFairfax team. We have some new faces here, including one who's joining us on our call today. So I want to introduce Shannon Smith, who is our Education and Community Engagement Manager. Oh, we're not going to restart. Hang on. The computer always wants to restart during a Zoom presentation, doesn't it? Shannon's here with us today. I think she is our only staff person on the call, but you may come into contact with some of the other people that you see here. Manuela and Allison run a lot of our communications and our social media. They reach out to a lot of our grantee organizations. You may work with Debbie or Caroline when it's time for the Arts Awards. Lots of friendly faces. We are a small but mighty team, and we are here for you. So thinking about our whole organization, if you're new to working with ArtsFairfax, or just if you are new to your role in interacting with us, we are the designated local arts agency for Fairfax County. Our mission is really dedicated to expanding support for access to the arts and culture within all of the county. As an art organization yourselves, there are opportunities where you can take advantage of the services that we're providing, whether or not you're a grantee, including sharing some information about what your organization does and how they interact with the community. And so these are some of the things here that we offer. I'm not going to dive too deeply into these sections, but please reach out if something here has piqued your interest and you'd like to know further about that. We can talk more, or I can point you in the direction of a team member who can help you. I will put two pieces of this work on your radar, though. One is that we share arts-related events with the general public. So through our email list, which is a bi-weekly email, we work really hard to curate opportunities for the general public to interact with the arts community in the county. You can kind of see what it looks like. I'll point you in the direction of some of these things when we look at the website later, but we have an arts directory, an events calendar, and a bi-weekly newsletter. They're all worthwhile resources for you and for the community. The second piece that should be on your radar is the way we promote opportunities for artists and arts organizations. So this is a little bit more curated toward you rather than the general public. So we are able to share job postings in the arts, artist calls, and of course, this is where we highlight our professional development workshops for arts organizations within the county. Be on the lookout for those, and I'll highlight where you can sign up for those things when we get to the website in just a little bit. All right, so getting down to the reason we're here today, the grants program is obviously a huge part of what Arts Fairfax does. Each year we do offer approximately $750 or more $1,000 in county funds for our grant programs. For FY25, we are anticipating 3 grant programs. The ticket subsidy grant, which is a rolling grant. In fact, the FY24 application is still open and ongoing. We are also, as we're here today, working on the operating support grant. And then after that program, we will have the project support grant. Each of those we're anticipating for FY25. So just narrowing down a little bit further and explaining more of our mission and what the grant provides. An operating support is really very broad for our arts organizations. The goals are really to advance the arts throughout the county, support the goals and objectives of your organization, help really maintain and develop your services. In addition, we really have an eye on any considerations of DEIA principles that are used within your organization, the services that you provide, and really being able to show that you're increasing art access for community members throughout our jurisdiction. So this is really broad language, but as we get into the application and the specific criteria, you will see some of these principles and purposes in that wording as well. We do have some very specific goals that have been established for the operating support grant program. You can, when we get to the spot where we look at the document that includes our grant guidelines, these are also listed within that document. So you'll be able to reference this as you're working on your application after today's conversation. But the goals of the program are to provide support for established and emerging arts organizations. I think that's one of the things that makes this program most unique. We also encourage wide participation in the arts by expanding exposure to and incorporating Fairfax County's diverse voices and cultural programming and making cultural programming available to all residents in Fairfax County. By promoting opportunities for a diversity of cultural workers, leaders, and individual artists and arts organizations, we hope to create, present, and celebrate the artistic endeavors and traditions. We also hope that this will be a catalyst for increased resiliency, transformation, and expanded resources to support arts organizations through public funding. All right, so narrowing in on what happens, how this all works. The process is kind of as outlined on the screen. We have an application, as I mentioned at the start of our conversation. That application is open. We'll look at it all before the end of the conversation today. Your organization will submit an application to Arts Fairfax. The deadline is April 5th. Come back to that a little bit further in a moment. The staff then review the application. After staff reviews the application, it is sent to a panel for review. I'm going to talk through both of those in further detail later in the conversation. We have a panel meeting that takes place. The panel itself will meet in person, and you can join us virtually. After the panel meeting, the applications are scored and Again, I'll get into that a little further in the conversation. But the grants are then approved by ArtsFairfax Grant Committee. They go to our board of directors for approval. That's the final approval of the grants. And then you're notified of the award. So we'll come back to a couple of these pieces in just a moment. Yeah. And all right, thinking further about eligibility. This is definitely a key piece for a lot of participants on this call or participants who had registered. There are very specific eligibility requirements that are outlined for applicants or organizations considering application here. So I'm going to read through most of them right now. You must have a core mission in the creation, exhibition, presentation, production, or performance of and/or education in an arts discipline, and operate as a standalone nonprofit 501c3 organization, or have current or pending status. A side note is you can also be an organization that's applying with a fiscal sponsor. So I'll come back to that a little bit further again in a moment. Your organization is required to have regular activity in either a minimum of 4 months or 120 days of the calendar year. You must present at least 51% of public art activities within the boundaries of Fairfax County, City of Falls Church, or the City of Fairfax. And then a second requirement that kind of supports that geographic designation. You can meet one of the following 3 criteria. Either meet, rehearse, exhibit, or operate within the geographical boundaries of Fairfax County, City of Falls Church, or City of Fairfax. Have 51% of your board of directors work or reside in Fairfax County, City of Falls Church, or City of Fairfax. Or verify that 51% of your attendees at performances, exhibitions, exhibits, or activities reside in Fairfax County, City of Falls Church, or City of Fairfax. So a couple of different options there. One of those 3 has to be true. And there are places in the application where you'll be able to speak to which one of those is best or best applies to your organization. There are some other eligibility requirements in section 5 here. Some of these we're going to look at a little bit more closely in the presentation as well, but I want to emphasize organizations over $750,000 are required to have an audit if your budget is over $750,000. You'll be asked to submit a 990 and a couple other documents. Again, we're going to look at that closer further in the presentation. And if you're a prior grantee, you'll have to have submitted all previous reporting requirements, created that ArtsFairfax directory listing, and shared your events on our calendar. So we'll come back to some of those in a minute, but that's a quick overview of the eligibility. And I do want to be clear that there are several instances which your organization may not be eligible. So if you are an arts division of an organization within a larger nonprofit, you are not eligible for operating support. The other 2 programs that we offer, the ticket support and the ticket subsidy and project support, you could potentially be eligible for those grants. Any organization that receives line item funding directly from Fairfax County or the state of Virginia is not eligible for the grant program. And then any organization that is a Department of George Mason or a nonprofit organization or foundation that supports a county agency is not eligible either. All right, so fiscal sponsorship. I did mention that if you are not a 501c3 organization, you can apply with a fiscal sponsor. So the way that works is, as we're looking at the application, there will be the very first question is really, are you applying with a fiscal sponsor? If you answer yes to that question, it does trigger a series of other questions and the specific documents that you will need to gather for the application to be processed. But basically, the gist is, please reach out to me if you are applying with a fiscal sponsor, and I will help walk through the steps. There are some information that we will need from your organization. There's additional information that we will need from the fiscal sponsor themselves. You, the organization here, will be the primary point of contact and really be the one to submit that application. But we will need to be in contact with enough time to facilitate that conversation between your fiscal sponsor to get that process rolling along. All right, there are a few restrictions to be aware of with this grant program. Again, I'm going to walk through this here, but it is available for you to review within the grant guidelines document on our website. So the intent of our grant program is that you're supporting activities and projects that occur within the boundary of Fairfax County, City of Falls Church, and City of Fairfax. You must have a qualified artistic or scholarly administrative and management leadership. So it can be a professional organization, it can be a volunteer organization, but you'll find places in the application that we're looking to see that you have qualified volunteers or qualified staff running your program. And the last one is very straightforward. This grant year falls between July 1st of 2024 and June 30th of 2025. A couple more pieces that are, again, very straightforward. Some things that cannot be used, the grant cannot be used for: any fundraising activities or capital campaigns, construction and renovation costs, or political advocacy costs. Cannot be used to activities not open to the general public. However, this does not include activities that take place in a school. So if you're working with a public school or another school to provide services, that counts as something that's open to the general public. Cannot be used for debt retirement, pre-grant costs, or any faith-based activities. All right, and then last detail for this moment, for FY25, there is not currently a matching requirement for this grant due to the ongoing recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm going to pause for a moment here because I've said a lot kind of quickly now. And so just thinking about initial eligibility and grant restrictions, I want to just give you a moment to ask any questions. You're welcome to put them into the chat or unmute yourself if you want anything that we can clarify before we move on.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, hi, Laura.
Hi, thank you so much. You mentioned briefly something, I believe, about previous grant recipients. And if this is going to be covered later in the meeting, like we can wait till later in the meeting. But if there were specific additional requirements, if you received the operating support grant in the past.
Yeah, I think the requirement that I was referring to, when you go through the eligibility quiz on our website, it'll ask if you have received a previous grant. It will ask if you have created a directory listing and listed your events on our website, and if you have I'd have to go back and check we'll look at the specific language in a minute, but it's just asking basically, have you submitted all your reports on time and done your paperwork for the previous grant? Oh, you're muted.
I have a question, Kelly.
Hang on 1 second. Laura, wait, Laura, you were muted and you were trying to tell me something else.
Sorry, and so that will pop up sort of as a pull down. If you click that you're a previous grant recipient, then it'll sort of direct you to those questions.
Yep.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right, and John, were you my next question?
Yes, I noticed the portion of the requirements for an address, and our certified address or our address of record with the IRS is a box number. I noticed on the Form 100 that box number is not acceptable. Does it matter to you what we use?
It does, yeah. And let's come back to that question a little bit further. I'm gonna go over that Form 100 and 102 in just a moment. And then maybe you and I can follow up specific to your organization after this.
Thank you.
All right. I'm gonna continue along. I think that's all we, maybe there's one person in the Joe, it looks like you had a question. You said financial stability is needed, but are needs a part of eligibility? This is not a needs-based grant. No, that's not a requirement for this particular program. All right, I'm going to continue. Oops, I lost my slide page. Here we go. There we go. So we have had a few recent updates to the application if you are a returner to this process. Some are this year and some of these updates are more recent last year. So one note we heard from our applicants at our recent feedback session was the need to adjust the financial table. So if you have been a prior applicant, the financial table is now just going to be an Excel document that you can download, and you will not have to re-input it into that table in the application like we did last year. If you're a new applicant and this means nothing to you, don't worry, we'll look at it together and walk through it all. The second thing that we have added this year is the ability to calculate your maximum award within the application itself. We in the past have had people maybe not really knowing how much money they could apply for or not quite applying for the right amount of money. So we have added a section that will help put that information together for you. I'll point that out as we look at the application as well. Other recent updates, and the rest of the items on this page were new last fiscal year, but I want to highlight them again. Small organizations, which are organizations with a budget between $5,000 and $100,000. You are able to apply on a separate application. There are fewer questions. It's a little bit shorter. The criteria is worded just a little bit differently because of that. If you are a small organization, you can also now request up to 25% of your budget. And again, that calculation is on there to hopefully calculate for you as well. Medium and large organizations do have a separate application, and we actually raised the maximum award amount last year to $60,000. We've also extended the appeal window, which I will talk about appeals toward the end of this conversation today, but you have 30 days now to submit an appeal. And then lastly was the organization profile for grant applicants. So I'm going to look at that piece just a little bit more closely as well. So if you're brand new to considering a grant, or if you did not apply last year for a grant, what you need to know is there are going to be two forms in Submittable that you have to complete to apply for this grant. One is the organization profile, and one is the application for the grant itself. We did this because the organization profile is going to carry over between this program and the project support grant, so that if you are applying for both, you don't have to answer some of these questions 2 times. You'll only have to fill out that part once. So the organization profile is a lot of questions that are pretty evergreen, and they might be things that you're seeing in other applications too. Things like describe your mission or what are your organization's goals. So hopefully that's something that you are going to be able to come back to and really not have to rewrite as much. But you'll take that organization profile document You will download it as a PDF. I will walk through all of that with you, and then you actually upload it in your application. So again, two pieces that you'll have to actually go through and submittable, but hopefully saving some time for anybody who's applying to multiple ArtsFairfax grants. All right, so diving in a little bit further to the small organization application and the medium-large organization application. This is just trying to spell out the difference between the two applications and which one you should be completing. So your budget size is determined by the total expenses in your organization's most recently completed fiscal year. The one asterisk to that is you cannot include any pass-through funds or in-kind expenses in your budget calculation. So if you're under $100,000, you'll be applying as a small organization. If you're over, you meet on the medium and large application. That does affect the total amount of award that you can use and apply for. And it certainly affects the application that you use. Lastly, if you are applying with a fiscal sponsor, you will use your organization's budget expenses and not the fiscal sponsors. Yes, so and just to emphasize again, pass-through funds, in-kind funds, anything that is collected by the organization, immediately dispersed, is you can't count that as an expense in your award calculation or in your total expenses. So there's a little bit more information about this on our website when you take a look at the grant guidelines. If you have any questions about whether or not something qualifies, please reach out and we can help determine what does and what doesn't. So getting into all those required documents. Some of the documents we're going to have you attach to the organization profile, and some will go into the application itself for the same reasons we mentioned, right? Some of these documents are really just for us to verify that your organization is eligible for the grant, and some are documents that our panelists are going to need to review in conjunction with your grant application. So the pieces that we're attaching to the organization profile, your IRS determination letter, the VA Form 102, or if you have an exception for that, the 100, and then your board list with addresses. You also don't necessarily need to give me every detailed address. If you have like if somebody is qualifying because they work in Fairfax County, I don't also need their home address. You know, you need to show what you need to show on that document. Yes, so lots of different formats that we see on the board list, but do what works for you that gives us the information that we need. So that 102, we always do get a lot of questions about the 102. But this is what we use to verify that you qualify as a Fairfax County or City of Falls Church, City of Fairfax organization. You cannot use a PO box as the primary address, but we need an address of record for your organization. If you are exempt from the 102, then we would ask you to submit your 100. There's a lot more information available linked on our website, including a frequently asked question for the 102 form that will take you directly to Virginia's website. If you are in the process of submitting this or up for a renewal, you know, we can accept a portion of it and the signed portion that is about to be submitted. Let me know if you have specific questions about your organization with this form. It does tend to be individual. All right. So once we get all the paperwork together, we get all the documents, we get your application in, here's what happens. Our ArtsFairfax staff will review your application for eligibility and completeness. So there are a lot of documents in there. Submittable is going to require you to upload a certain quantity of documents or answer all those questions, but there are times when something gets missed or maybe the document didn't scan right or didn't link right. So we will reach back out to you, of course, if we find something like that. But if it is incomplete, it is technically subject to rejection without evaluation. So please do your best to get all the information there. If your application is rejected, you'll be notified via email and through Submittable. So our applications are then anybody who's eligible is reviewed by the panel. Our panelists are all have some kind of professional background within the arts, and they have relevant skills and knowledge to the programs that they're evaluating. We do welcome any volunteer suggestions that you have. So if you want to share a name or connect us with anybody, we're always looking to extend our pool of panelists. All right, so our panelists get the applications ahead of time. They're allowed usually like 3 to 4 weeks to read the applications that they're reviewing. The panel itself will meet in person. Applicants, organizations that are applying, are able to observe the panel virtually. So we will send you a link prior to that panel itself and let you know kind of an order on which day your application will be reviewed on so that you can choose to attend and listen in if you like. One benefit to doing that is that you can offer a correction form during the meeting. And I'll share more about that after the application's completed. But essentially, if you are there and listening to the panel review your application and they say, wow, they didn't say anything about how awesome their board is. And then you know in the application that you have explained who's on your board very detailed in question 3B, you can submit a correction form to say, you missed this, it's in the application already. And we will read that into the record and the panel will consider that as well. So the ArtsFairfax Board of Directors does make the final funding decisions and approval. They make those decisions based on the evaluation of the panel and the overall grants program, the goals of the grants program itself and ArtsFairfax. So a little bit more about the staff, our role. We do not score the panels or the applicants themselves. We will recruit and assign panelists. We will check everything to make sure it's eligible. Ultimately, we will compile the scores and put forward a funding scenario. During that panel meeting, we'll facilitate the conversation. We'll guide the panelists in what the procedure and process is. And then we will, of course, provide technical assistance for you to submit the application itself, or direct you to Submittable if we can. All right. So the process of determining the grant amount award. So after each meeting, we take the applicants that are reviewed and each will get an average score based off what the panelists submitted and how they scored the application. So we use that average score. We use something called the Z-score, which enables us to combine multiple days of panels and come up with a scoring number that puts them all together. And then convert that into a percentage, which leads us to an award amount based on your funding request. So it's important to know that you may receive less funding than the amount you requested. And that's tied directly to the score that you have on your application. Our calculations are verified by an outside accountant before they're finalized and sent to the committee. And then the committee itself will also make funding recommendations based upon what's available, what the scores are, and what the ultimate goals of the program are as well. So the criteria itself is pretty straightforward. We have 5 major areas that we are evaluating applications in: the organization profile, the programs and services that you're offering, community engagement, organizational effectiveness, and financials. There are 2 different sets of criteria for the small and large organization, but they all fall under these 5 categories. So you're just going to see a lot more detail in the medium and large organization with additional questions than you will in the smaller organization's application. I'll also say that each of these categories is equally weighted in the evaluation. So when we put together that panel, we usually aim for about 5 individuals on each panel. They score each application on their own. They provide that score, they discuss the panel, and then they're allowed to revise that score during the discussion as well. ArtsFairfax will select panel members, with an effort in mind to have a diverse background of participants, both in their own personal diversity as well as their arts knowledge. So we are, like I said, always recruiting and looking to build that pool of people. All right. So I will share the criteria. I'm not going to read both of these, all of this. This criteria is available in a few places for you to come back and reference. This is outlined specifically in our grants guidelines document. And then you'll also find it in the application itself. As you're filling it out, the evaluation criteria is right there at the start of each section for you to be able to reference. But you can see that this is the small organization evaluation criteria. And the medium and large organization criteria has really expanded. So this is the first 2. And then the last 3. All right. So I know I've mentioned the website several times in our conversation. We're going to go there in just a minute. I do want to kind of summarize the resources that we have for you. It's a lot of information. The grant guidelines are available on the website. There's a separate version for small organizations and a separate for medium and large organizations. We will put this info session up on the website. We will put this slide deck up on the website. You can expect to see that sometime next week. There are application instructions online, so some basics about navigating Submittable, what to do if you run into trouble with Submittable. You'll also be able to see the application in Word version formats. Both of those, the small and the medium large, separate documents. There are some tables that you can download on the website as well, the financial table, the activities table. You will see some model applications. So big thank you again to the organizations who let us share the work that they put together last year. So if you're curious to see how other organizations have written their application, there's some of that is included on our website as well. There's a required document checklist. And then a financials webinar recording. The webinar is actually about 2 years old, but it's still pretty relevant to the financial information or questions you might have. So there's a link on that website to that conversation. It's worth listening to if you're feeling unsure of how to approach the financial questions on the application. You can find some recent recipients and then a long list of resources. So I'm going to pause here for another second. I'm going to switch to the website in just a moment, but also give you a second to ask some additional questions. So I stop this. My computer always takes a minute. I think Doug's got a question. Doug?
Yes, I apologize for coming late. Two quick questions. So I surmise from what you're saying is that you're not doing a separate financial working session as you did in years past.
Do you mean in the application?
No. I think it was last year, the year before, you had a separate information working session like this, but just for financial people.
That was just kind of a one-time thing, and that recording that you're thinking of is on the website. But
Okay.
of course, if you have questions, about the finance aspect, please reach out.
Okay, the second question was the financial worksheet spreadsheet. So is the format of the financial submission changed, or is it just we're just submitting the worksheet that we did before?
You're submitting the worksheet instead of having to input it again into submittable. Does that make sense?
God bless you.
We heard that from a few people, so I'm glad that helps.
Oh, it helps.
Steven, do you also have a question?
I do, yes, thank you. I have it was about the examples that you provide, and I'm definitely a small organization, started in the spring, summer last year. So, but the one grant I applied to through you guys last year, when I was sitting in on the session, I was really just kind of taken aback, or just I was off guard and surprised at how much they criticized the demographic information that I had provided, like that part of the application. I see it comes up again here, and I'm just wondering, do you have examples of successful answers and pros as part of those examples that you listed for other categories for those demographic issues that you brought up in the application?
That's a good question. We tried to put together examples that hit on every question in the application. I'd have to go back to look really closely to see if there's anything that specifically addresses demographic. I mean, that demographic part, but I think we've put out something that's really broad and can hopefully address that for you. If you feel like it's not, let me know and I'll see if there's something else that we can share.
I'll have a look. I was just surprised at how far off I was apparently from the mark on that particular application. So
that
yeah,
is yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other question? I'm gonna go back to
Will you be talking about the work samples later?
Yes, when we get into the application itself.
Thank you.
Yeah, so there's a question that came in to me and through chat. If you filled out the organization profile from the previous year's application cycle, do we still need to resubmit the organization profile? And the short answer to that right now is yes. So I'll kind of explain why when we get over to the application itself. But I did want to address that question since it popped into me. All right, since I've been going on and on about how awesome our website is, which it is, so I would like to just go ahead and give you a couple highlights here so you know where to look for things, because there is a lot of information. So when you come to artsfairfax.org, this is where you land. There's a lot of different ways to navigate to our grants program. But right now, if you scroll down the page just a little bit, you can see the 3 programs listed here for you to explore. So I'm going to hop over to the operating support grant page. And really, all of our grant pages are kind of organized in the same way. You're going to see a couple tweaks to this next week when the recording goes up, but each page has a description, the key upcoming deadlines, and then these 3 icons down here, which are just really, really helpful resources for you as you're going through the process. So I'm going to start by going to grant guidelines and application. And so this is where we kind of mentioned earlier, I've been referring to these guidelines. If you need the documents, I would really recommend before you get started to just take a minute to read through the guidelines that are here. It's certainly going to help you, I think, as you begin to address the questions in the application. You can also preview those questions in the application. So if you are working with a group of people to write, or if you want to be able to share here before you go into submittable, this you can download as a Word document. You can work offline, save it. Again, just be aware of the small and then the medium and large options. Plus, we have the sections from the sample applications, as I mentioned. We divided those into small, medium, large too, because they got to be very long documents quickly. So last, we will update these 2 things next week. You'll be able to see that as they're done. And then when you're ready, this will take you to the application. I'm not going to go there just yet. I want to also point out another page of resources for you. Think of these more as maybe something to view while you're submitting or in the process of submitting. You can see the online instructions. You can preview the activities table. Financials table we will absolutely come back to in a moment. This is that financials webinar we were chatting about, and then a couple other resources you might find relevant. As you go down the page, there's a few more pieces that are going to help if you have questions beyond the application. So everything you need to know about the 102 or the 100, please check these links here if you're not sure what to do or what is the best option for your organization. Some tips for submittable as well. We can help with some of that. Sometimes the IT questions for submittable have to go to submittable. And then some more general resources for you to be able to access, particularly if you are not sure how to answer some of those demographic questions or not sure where to go. There are several resources within the county that you can view to search for demographic information that might be relevant to the program that you are offering. So lots of choices here, something to browse just as you're beginning to think about your application as well. And while we're on the webpage, I will quickly draw your eye up to the newsletters section here. That was one of the first things we chatted about. So if you're looking to stay in contact with us, you can go there to add your email to the newsletter. All right, I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint for just a moment. Rearrange here. And go through a couple more things. The last time we had a panel, here we go. I'll take just a minute for this to pop up on the screen. But every time we have a panel, we get feedback from our panelists as well about their experience. So we've tried to compile that for you so that it can be a resource for you as well as you're continuing to think about your application process. So one thing we hear all the time, even though it's not quite as specific maybe as helpful, but panelists always tell us they can tell when somebody wrote something at the last minute. So to whatever capacity you're able to, please begin your application early. It's February 15th, and this is open until April 5th. So we hope that that has given you some time to really address the questions that are in the application. As best as you can, using data and demographics to really support your needs and goals and vision for the organization are most beneficial. Panelists also, we do try to pair up panelists who make sure that there's somebody who has experience in that arts area when an application is being reviewed. But to some extent, you need to assume your panelist knows nothing about your organization. And particularly when it comes to like acronyms or sort of niche parts of your fields, you may find that you need to explain that broadly. And then lastly, I think we hear a lot about that financial piece, including diverse revenue streams, and really speaking to that in the budget narrative goes a long way on that section. All right, a couple of other panelist insights. Demonstrating the community that you are working with, that is around you, including how you identify what that community needs and what is specific to your community and not just maybe the area in general is something that is valued in the application. Differentiating yourself as an organization and explaining why you're unique is something that panelists like to see. And then, speaking about diversity holistically and not just as like a piece by itself is really what panelists acknowledge in an application. So how is it affecting your board and your leadership, the ensemble, and your audience, or whatever pieces of those parts of your program that you work with? All right. We do have a couple of grant writing tips we like to share. Some of these were reflected in the panelist insights that were shared with us as well. But I want to highlight a couple of pieces, particularly in relation to submittable. We said that application is available as a Word document, and I would strongly suggest doing a lot of your writing and editing there. You can save and come back to submittable. Unfortunately, like in the last month or so, submittable has been just a little bit glitchy to work in. And some strange things happen when you type. I don't know if you're going to have that experience too. I know we've reported it to submittable, but I would highly recommend working in Word or some other program, saving it there, and then ultimately inputting to submittable. Shout out to Susan from the Reston Corral, who emailed me today to also say she was having some glitches with her ticket subsidy application. So just be aware of that as you're going along. Certainly that it, unfortunate timing for that glitch, and hopefully it sort of gets itself worked out in the next couple of days. Other pieces that really support good grant writing, be clear and concise and refer back to that evaluation criteria to get to your answers. When we look at the application in a minute, you'll see again that criteria is posted at the top of each section and the questions are right below it. So just making sure you're going back up there to reference them is really going to support your application. Oops, oh, I clicked too fast. All right. Avoiding acronym and jargon when possible. I know it's nearly impossible to avoid all acronyms, so if you have them, please just make sure that it's clear what that is to an applicant who may not be familiar with that. Also, since we have a lot of arts organizations within the county who are applying for this grant, we can't usually have a panelist who is involved with one of these organizations. What that means is we get a fair amount of panelists who are based out of Arlington or Alexandria City. So they're local and they know a lot of things about the local area, but they also may not know Fairfax specific things and Fairfax specific jargon. So if you're speaking about something in that area, it might be helpful to elaborate as well. Another big piece I'll highlight on here that we see a lot, the financial information on your application. There are 2 or 3 places where you might be asked to actually input some similar financial information. And when it doesn't line up right, the panel notices. They are absolutely checking that out, and they have a lot of questions if it's not adding up right. So as you do a final proofread, make sure you're looking at those numbers and making sure that it's what you meant to share with us. And then I'll say it again, start your application early if you can. The application itself too is actually not evaluated on grammar or spelling. So that's not something that is taken into consideration, but rather the program itself, the whole offering of the organization is what is being evaluated. All right, so last piece before we hit on the application itself. This is a long list of things, mostly what we just looked at on the website. Right below that list of resources that you could download, lots of links that might be helpful in your application, depending on the work that you're doing and who you are trying to work with. So links that can take you to Fairfax County resources or FCPS information or other information from federal government about the demographics of the county. All right. So as you complete your application, you'll be asked to agree to the terms and conditions of our grant. It is spelled out in Submittable. It is also spelled out in the guidelines document of the application. These are some of the pieces that it hits on. The grant period, we kind of talked about that earlier, July 1st through June 30th. The organizational eligibility, how you can use your funds. The couple requirements that I do want to highlight here, and we touched on this in a question earlier, acknowledging ArtsFairfax funding of your grant. So all grant recipients would be required to acknowledge ArtsFairfax funding for the duration of your grant. You're not required to do that if you are only an applicant. If you currently have an ArtsFairfax grant, then yes, this is applicable to you. We ask that you acknowledge ArtsFairfax in all print materials and digital communications. We would like you to include ArtsFairfax ad in your program. We ask you that you hashtag us and share what you have about the work that you're doing under our grant on social media. And then what we ask that you add the calendar or add events to our calendar, and then we can link to your website as well. You can find all this information on the grant communications kit, which is that third icon on the grants webpage that we were looking at just a minute ago. So hopefully it's all there ready for you to download and for you to take care of. There isn't anything you need from us to get started on this. So if you're a current grantee, thank you for doing this already. And if you're a future grantee, we'll send a reminder about this once your grant is accepted. All right. The appeals process, we kind of touched on this at the very beginning. You do have 30 days to submit an appeal if you are denied grant funding or have an issue with the funding that you were allotted. if you were denied, that if you feel you were denied based on criteria that is something other than what was set forth in the guidelines, or the panel failed to apply the applicable guidelines, or the panel failed to consider something that was in your application or some relevant evidence that was presented, or if for some reason there was a direct, the funding was a direct result of a undisclosed conflict of interest. So this process is spelled out a little bit further in the guidelines, and I'm happy to talk about it with you if necessary. All right. Last piece, the full timeline of the process for FY25. The application is open now. It's ready to go. We're going to walk through it in just a minute. The application deadline is April 5th, 2024. It is due at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That is a hard deadline. 7 p.m. April 5th, 2024. It's on the application. It should be on the website. That's the end. You will need to have submitted both the organization profile and the application at that time. After that, the panel meetings are scheduled for May 8, 9, and 10. So 3 days of panel meetings. Again, they're in person in our office, but applicants are invited to attend virtually. The announcement for this award comes in August of 2024. Based on the award that you receive, you'll get 70% of those funds at that time. So that's usually, I just found a typo. That is usually a check goes out like in mid-August or early September. Unfortunately, there's one typo in here. The final 30% payment is September of 2025, not 2024, as it says here. And that comes after your final report is submitted for the grant. And that is due on August 1st of 2025. So just to be clear, final payment September of 2025, which is that 30%. Right. So I'm going to stop here. I see a couple things popping up in the chat on the calendar. Oh, yes. So a couple people asking about the calendar and how to get details on there. The first thing I want to share before we go back to the application, getting your events on the calendar is a manual process. So if you submit something, it does get approved by a human. It will not appear there automatically. I know that what I hear from Manuela, who is our main website guru, sometimes people actually leave things as a draft and it doesn't actually get submitted. So my first suggestion would be to go back into to your submission and then make sure it was submitted and it's not still like saved as a draft. If you can't, there is a if you're interested in social media and that's your jive, Manuela did a great post in late December or late November, early December about how to get events up on the website. If I can find it and link to it, I'll try to do so before our conversation is over. If that is not your preferred method of communication, please reach out to myself or Manuela. Her email is on the website. And maybe, Shannon, if you have a second, maybe you can pop her email into the chat for us. And she can help you walk through that process as well. I know one thing that comes up is if like a previous person associated with your organization had been that main point of contact, and then now it needs to be somebody else, she can help you change that over if necessary, or help you reset that login so you can adjust and adapt and all those things. So long story short, if you're stuck in the events calendar, please don't give up. Please let us know. We'll help you out. And we want your events on there too. All right. I think, yes, Keith, you had asked, yes, we're going to make this available online, both the slides and the recording of today's conversation. Susan, did you have a question or did we get it answered? Or is Susan still here?
Yes, it was more of a comment. One about the submittable glitches that are going on. It really was, in the end, I had to do the document in Word and then cut and paste because it seemed to be caching through or recycling through cached responses. So text would appear, it would disappear, it would reappear. So yeah, do yourself a favor and prepare it in Word first, and then just cut and paste it just before you're ready to submit. And the other comment that I had was on the review panels, how helpful that is to watch them, not only for your own grant application, but for other similar organizations or all the organizations. You can get a wealth of information and some great ideas and tips just watching the full panel review. Thanks.
Thanks. I agree. I appreciate hearing that as well. All right, so we are going to dive into that application itself. So let's get there. All right. Let's see. We can all see my screen. There's a couple different ways to get to this application, but if you're on our website, in a lot of places for the operating support grant, you'll see something that says submit your application, and that's a great way to get there. So we'll go there right now. It takes us to a page that looks just like this, the ArtsFairfax submittable homepage. If you have not applied to anything from ArtsFairfax before, you'll need to create a login first. If you're working as an organization, we hope that you can consistently apply under the same email address so that the same email is associated with your organization. So if you have a general inbox, that's helpful, like grants@artsfairfax.org, something like that. If you don't have a general email, or if you've transitioned from a previous person who is managing grants that maybe like their email had been associated with the login, we may have a way to change that. So if you would like to transition kind of who owns those applications, please reach out to me and I'll see what I can do to help you through that process. So there's a couple of basics about things, explaining what is available here on this website. Some links that actually will take you back to our website if necessary. And then as you scroll down the page, you'll see the applications that are open. So today we're going to take a quick peek at the organization profile. And then the other two that we're here for would be either the small organization or large organization. You will notice that the application for operating support for small and large organizations has a deadline. It ends at April 5th at 7 p.m. The organization profile does not have that same deadline because it's a piece that we still use with the project support grant. But this is the one you're going to start with, and you're going to add it to the next section as well. So I'm going to go here, and if you need to, you can peek at the guidelines, and this really is just going to take you back to the home page to find the guidelines themselves. But we'll go to submit to start with. And I began filling this application out before our conversation today, save us some time. So there's, again, notes for you to read through at the top of the page. It explains the process. Applicants will upload a PDF of this form with certain FY25 ArtsFairfax grant applications. gives you some instructions, talks you through the process of how to download the completed document, and then how to get it into the next application. If you have any trouble, please reach out. It's easy for us to talk you through the process, hop on a call and work through it together. And you will not be the first person to do so. Many people have done it. All right. So I'll also draw your attention to this feature right here to manage collaborators. This is where you can add someone from your organization to give them access to the application to edit or review. So if you have a finance person that has to be responsible for the finance questions and you're doing all the other things, you can give them direct access as well. So again, I've just gone through to put in some test answers. This is what the application looks like. There are a few sections where you might click yes or no, and an additional question will pop up. So if it's not your mailing address, it's going to ask you what actually is. Some of the questions also have an explanation kind of written beneath the main portion of the question. So here in this section, we are asking for your Fairfax County Magisterial District. We've also linked a website that can help you determine what that is if you're not sure. So we'll select something here. Oh, my computer's moving kind of slow. Several questions are required. They're noted that way by the star next to them, of course. This being the organization profile is the one place where we're collecting a lot of detail about name, email, phone number from several people. Again, you can see questions that include a main question as well as kind of a secondary explanation or specific directions for that question. This is one section I like to highlight here for the finance example, because we are asking for your expenses, but you're actually going to input the budget, the full budget in the application itself. And when this answer doesn't match up with the budget that is in the application, it's definitely a piece for you to double check because the panelist noticed. So I'm just plunking in some numbers for the moment. As you get further down the application itself, there's a section to attach your 3 files. Again, some links to that the 102 information should you need it, more specifics about what we're looking for, an option for signatures. And then the last thing you'll do is agree with the terms of use. And now that I'm thinking of it, it might not actually pop up while I'm sharing on Submittable or on Zoom, but if I click the terms of use here, I do get a pop-up on this screen. Not sure if you can see it too, but I do get something that pops up and asks me to agree. And then you can either save this as a draft if you're not ready to submit, or go ahead and submit. If you do attempt to submit this and you have accidentally left a field blank, it will not go through. It doesn't jump back to the question like some other websites do. So if you're hitting submit and it feels like nothing is happening, something's wrong. You're missing something somewhere. So scroll back up. It is highlighted in red if you miss something, but it might take a minute to find it. So now I finished the organization profile. I need to download that so that we can attach it to the new application. So if I go up to this section here, this drop down, it says Grants Arts Fairfax because that's the name of the account I'm in. It might say your name or your organization's name or your email. But there's a section that drops down and says My Submissions. So we're gonna head there. We have lots of test applications in this one, but you can see the most recent one we just did is received. It was the test application for organization profile. And so this is where you will go to download that profile. If you save something as a draft, you'll come over to this tab and be able to find the draft and come back in and continue or delete and start over. So submissions here, drafts here. All right. So moving back to the main ArtsFairfax page, once you have the organization profile, you'll want to head to one of these two grant applications, of course. So you do need to know that total expense amount before you determine which application you're using. I'm going to go into the medium large application today because they're similar, but this has more questions. And since this is larger, that's one we'll take a look at. We're not going to go all the way through it, but I am going to highlight a couple things. Again, deadlines up here in a couple places. It is due by 7 p.m. on Friday, April 5th. This form is actually going to start with an eligibility quiz. So if anywhere along the way you've given an answer that makes your organization ineligible, it's going to kick you out. So we have picked the large budget, and note down here that, you know, this is the application for large budgets. If you've accidentally clicked the wrong one and you should actually be in the small one, there's a link to take you back there. But if you were to select level 1 or 2, you would immediately be kicked out of the application. So we'll just pick this one here. Again, we're talking through each of the individual eligibility requirements and how we're reviewing them. So we've mentioned the 102 here. We can say, yes, we are within Fairfax County. So each of these, there's about 12 questions. Each of them is something that's listed in the eligibility for the grant, and they just pop up kind of one by one here. This is the one that you have to say no to if you have you should not have received funding from Fairfax County or the state of Virginia. And then this last one here, I think, is the one we addressed earlier in the conversation. There's that question that said, it's actually not, it's just if it's applicable to you, did you submit all of last year's reports? Same thing, if it's applicable to your organization, did you list the events last year on the website? So it's these 12 questions that come up for eligibility, and then you hit next, and you're able to get into the full application at this point. So a couple other pieces I'd like to highlight. Again, the Manage Collaborators feature here. We touched on this earlier in the conversation as well. Are you applying with a fiscal sponsor? If you are to say yes here, several other questions are going to pop up. My computer is moving kind of slowly, but it'll talk you through the process. Again, take some time to read this, reach out to me, and we'll work through it together. I'm going to select no for now. One piece to highlight under organization name, please write your name the same exact way if you can in the organization profile as you do in the application itself. It helps everything line up faster. It's not the end of the world if you don't. So we collect just a little bit of basic information here. And this first thing you're asked to do is upload the organization upload the organization profile. The only PDF option, or only option here, is a PDF. That's the way that you'll download it from Submittable as well. If you're having trouble downloading the Submittable form, there's directions linked right here. It's a Submittable article that'll talk you through the steps of how to download that as a PDF. So I mentioned earlier that you will have to resubmit a new organization profile. And part of that is because we found this past year that some of the questions that were in there, we actually need record of them every year. So in the future, we are hoping that you'll just be able to edit what exists there already. This year is going to be a new document because we needed to pull out some things separately so that we could keep a record of that in Submittable. And one of those pieces is the performance numbers. So this is one thing that was in last year's profile that has just moved over to the application for that reason. But as you continue to each question, I'll highlight here, the sections are divided by like a large header, and then you can find, again, the criteria that we were looking at for each section right under it. So as you're answering the questions in section 2, you can scroll up to refer to that criteria. You might also notice that throughout the application and the profile, there's a suggested word count. It is not a limit. It is a suggestion, and I think especially in the organization profile, doing what you can to stick to that limit is worthwhile for our panelists, just given the amount of applications they have to read. So we come now to the first of 2 tables. This table is the same as last year. This you'll input directly into the application itself. So you can view a copy of this on the website as a Excel document, but you will submit your answers by typing in here. And my computer's struggling. We'll let that one go for a minute. I think it's going to be very self-explanatory. When you get to it in the application, if you have questions, please let me know. Somebody touched on work samples earlier. Each applicant includes a section for you to upload work samples. We've included a large variety of documents that you can upload here. You can also link directly to online sources, but what I want to recommend there, and make sure you notice, if you link to an online source, it needs to be a source that does not require a login for a panelist to view. So it has to be something that would not require a subscription, a login, a code, anything like that. It has to be a direct link to that source if you choose to link something on the internet. There's a lot of other specifics here that you can read through, and please reach out if you have questions about what's acceptable or should be included. Again, these are questions in the application, a lot of narrative that's here. When you come to the checkboxes, you can check multiple answers. It's easier to check multiple answers when you're not also running a Zoom meeting on your laptop. And then there's a place to upload the staff and board bios. You can see some recommendations for optional things to include there as well. And I want to just look real quick at the financial section because this did get some tweaking. So the financial table, you'll notice, is actually an upload this year. It didn't look like the table we had for program and activities. So there is a very specific format that you must use to submit the table. It's linked here. It'll take you back to our website. It's that page with a lot of documents, but it says financials table, and that is the table that you must include on this website. It's locked so that the cells should be calculating totals by themselves, and that you can only add notes where it says you can add notes. You won't be able to add lines or anything like that. If you're running into any trouble with this process, again, please email me so we can provide some support or troubleshoot together. So when you get that Excel document saved, you will upload it here. So it'll be an attachment instead of a table that you're inputting within the application. The second new piece in the financials table is this grant amount eligible. So it's going to be helpful for you to have your financial table completed before you do this section, right? Because you're going to look at answers on the financials table. So we've asked and recommended you refer to the total expenses excluding additional. That's a specific cell labeled on that spreadsheet. It's highlighted in yellow, so it should be very easy to find. The first question, because we're in the medium and large organization application, is if you had expenses over $400,000. So if you do that, if you say yes, you're automatically going to see that your award, the maximum award eligible for your organization is $60,000, because that's the highest award that we can offer. If you had less expenses than $400,000 and you click no, you will see a small table appear here. All you have to do is enter your total in this first cell, whatever your expenses were for the year. Click outside that cell, and slowly but surely, a total will appear in B3 that will indicate the award that your organization is eligible for. So it's still up to you to decide the amount that your organization is requesting, and that will go here. But this is going to give you the math, so you don't have to think through it on your own. All right, so we are approaching 1:30 already. Couple other pieces come here for you to upload in this section, additional financial documents that are required, the 990, and then the treasurer's report or audit. And the very last thing for you to address, anything else that you want to share, anything that's relevant to your organization that you want our panelists to know. Is this your last minute? Throw it in there for us. You'll see a checklist of the attachments that need to be in the application itself, a place for signatures, and that same terms of use, and the draft and submit save there. So it's a lot of information. You do actually have to submit it on Submittable for it to be considered an application. So you can't just download the Word document and email me the Word document. It's got to come in, it's got to be submitted, and it's got to come in by that deadline. We have officially hit 1:30, so I'm going to hop into the chat. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. If you want to hang on for a minute, I can stay and answer what questions you have. And I want to emphasize again that we're here for questions as you're going through this application. Please start with the eligibility requirements and review that and ask your questions about that first. I would hate for you to do a lot of work and then find out you're ineligible. I'm here. I'll put my contact info up on the screen, and then I will get to some questions as well. The last piece I should mention, oh, my PowerPoint's free. Man, I won't put it up on the screen. I'll put it in the chat in a minute. If you are a Fairfax County based organization and you're interested in the Capital One Hall partnership, there is an upcoming info session about that. It's also virtual. It is next Wednesday evening at 6 p.m. and the registration for that is available on our website. And then the other grant that's currently open is our ticket and participation subsidy grant. So if you're eligible for the operating support, you're probably also eligible for that. Take a look at that opportunity. It's a rolling grant, and reach out if you have questions for that as well. All right, let's see if we can get back. And I'm just gonna put my contact info in the chat because my PowerPoint is not coming back up. And then you can just, I know there's not a lot of phone calling for a lot of people these days, but I don't mind. You can just give me a call if you want to talk it through, or it's too hard to put into an email. I did that with somebody already this morning. So my phone number is in here as well. Yes. And our contact information is available on the website. So I'm going to begin to go back through the chat and see what we have not answered. If I accidentally miss your question and you're still here, please let me know. If an organization's approved budget includes pass-through items, art sales, payments, but these are to be excluded in the profile, how best to explain the discrepancy? I think in the narrative, so in both the budget and the narrative, there is a place for you to explain that this is pass-through funds. So the budget, I believe, has a line that's specifically for like in kind, and then maybe like another line. So there's a notes column at the end of the budget where you can address that as well. And then I would write it out in your narrative and say, like, this is why there's a discrepancy. If you know that there's a discrepancy, be very explicit about why there's a discrepancy. Budget says, do budgets need to be fiscal year or calendar year? It is your organization's fiscal year. There's a spot on the application for you to spell out the dates of your fiscal year. And then when you do that financial document, it's going to ask you for the previous fiscal year, the current fiscal year, and the proposed next fiscal year. So your estimates for all those things, or your numbers for all those things. Estimates sounds right. All right. Seemingly, if you only did 3 events on the previous season, but planned 4 to 5 in the coming season, are you eligible, Stephen? I will get back to you and double check. I need to double check for you. I'm not sure. Robin says, please consider making the program table and upload also. I hear you, Robin. It will not be an upload for this year. So I know that some of you heard this in the feedback session. Part of the reason we wanted to keep these in the table is because Submittable does have some features that allow us to pull data directly from those tables, and there's real value in us being able to get it out of the application like that. So we are trying to walk a balance of making your life easier and getting data that we need in a format that's usable to ArtsFairfax. So right now the program table is going to stay the way it is, but it's not necessarily a forever commitment. Thank you for your feedback, Robin. John says, a treasurer's report separate from the financial spreadsheet. Yes, it is. And is there a minimum data set for the report? John, I would suggest taking a look at that financials webinar. It goes into a little bit better detail than I can do at the moment for the treasurer's report. And I want to say, like, it's kind of a long webinar, but I think it's also bookmarked, so you can maybe see some chapters of that and hopefully get to that space quickly. If you can't find it, I can take another look and follow up with you about that as well.
Thank you.
All right. Tim, you're not wrong. There is a cutoff there, that yes, an organization at $99,999 is eligible for more than somebody at $101,001. Yes, you're right. That is the way it is currently written. Other questions?
If I had a quick question.
Yeah.
For the financial table, this sounds like a tiny question. Is there a title that you would like? Because I know for the supplementary materials, like you were very clear you wanted the name of the organization and then like supplementary one. For the financial table, is there a similar title?
That's a great question. I will go back into the application itself and make a recommendation. It's not gonna be a huge requirement, but since we have it on all the others, I'll add something there so that it follows the same path.
Okay, and then it'll be very clear, like that we downloaded the Excel sheet from ArtsFairfax, filled in our information, and then we uploaded it to the.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Doug, do you have another question for me?
Yes, on the financial table, we've stumbled over this in the past. In terms of fiscal year, is it your fiscal year or our fiscal year?
It is your organization's fiscal year.
God bless you.
I should just add that to my email signature for the next 6 months. It's your organization's fiscal year. Anything else? Okay. I will mention it again. I'm here. I'm ready for questions. Please reach out early as you can. I know there's always many things on your plate, but the more time we have to check in, the better response I can give you, the more successful you can be. I'm here. I'll hang on for a minute. I'm not gonna run away too quick. So if anybody is still got pieces, I can answer them. But I think we're coming to the end here. So thank you, Laura.
I actually have one more quick question. I'm sorry. For the financial table, at least for last year, I'm assuming for this year as well, you submit the previous year's financial data, this current year's financial data, and the next year's financial data, or at least what you project to be the next year's financial data. If you applied the previous year, and so thus you included your fiscal year 25 data as your quote unquote projected data from last year's application, it's okay that it shifts a little bit, like since it's projected, if there's a shift from what you did last year as opposed to what actually gets reported as this year's current.
Yeah, because we want to, the application itself is also going to be more about seeing, there's a question on there, like, is there a substantial difference between what was anticipated and what actually happened? Actually, now that I say that, I think that question is really addressed when you report on this current year. And so that'll be more where that part is addressed. This is kind of like a whole new application in and of itself, right? So this is a fresh consideration. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes perfect sense. So then we look in the review that we have due in August of 24 for last year's.
So like
roughly.
Because you're mentioning your budget that you submitted for the FY24 grant has had modifications throughout the year.
No, I'm talking the projected, because last year we submitted FY23 as previous, FY24 as current, I think. No. Yeah. And then and 25 is I think I'm a year off. 22 was previous, 23 was current, 24 was projected. This year it's 24 current, 25 projected, I think.
It depends on when your budget organization, when
Yeah.
yours. So if you get stuck, just call me. Figure it out.
Okay. Sorry for the
That's okay.
details.
We have a
Okay.
lot of
Thank you.
circular conversations about budget sometimes, so it's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you all. Thanks, everybody. I think I hit all the questions in the chat. Somebody offered to be a panelist in a direct message to me. If you're that person, can you send me an email? I want to just make sure that
I certainly will.
thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Um,
everybody.
I will say that if you are a part of an organization applying for this grant, you cannot be a panelist. But
am-
we have a project support
sense.
grant too. So sometimes not every organization applies for that, and you might be able to be involved in that.
Okay.
So,
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.
thanks, everyone.
Thank you.